Good morning. Today is the 18th day of Iyar, the 26th of May, and it is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer means the 33rd day of the Omer. And even though this is a new, one might say, not exactly a holiday because we don't have any special commandments on this day, but we celebrate and commemorate it as the traditional day of the passing of the sage Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon is one of the, one might say, 4 or 5 most important sages from the rabbinic period. He was born sometime after the destruction of the Second Temple, and he was a disciple of Rabbi Akiva in his later years. And he witnessed the Bar Kokhba rebellion. And something that I may have talked about in the past, Rabbi Shimon was very dedicated to his teacher, to Rabbi Akiva, who supported this rebellion. There were a lot of sages who didn't, many rabbis of the Mishnaic period, the early Mishnah period, who did not. They felt that it wasn't the right direction to go. But he supported his teacher very strongly. He never said anything against it. But when the time came and Rabbi Akiva had been tortured to death by the Romans with 9 other great sages, Rabbi Shimon, even though he was against the Romans, he did not take this approach of trying to fight them. He called out all their problems, their iniquities, their hypocrisy, and he was hated by them for it, but he never staged any kind of active opposition to them. Instead, Rabbi Shimon took a different path, and he authored the teachings that were passed down to us in some way that we don't exactly know how, in the Zohar. As the entire Zoharic literature, which is actually a number of works. There's many reports that the Zohar that we have in our hands today is about 1/10 of what the original Zohar was like. And apparently on this day, traditionally, he passed away on the 33rd day of the Omer. And we usually designate this day as the day of the giving of the inner teachings of the Torah, because the Zohar and what Rabbi Shimon taught was the gateway to our understanding of the Torah's inner teachings. There's so much to say about this, and I don't usually teach Zohar because it's just not a book that I think many people could really gain from studying directly. It's a book that really requires a lot of introspection, a lot of thought, a lot of introductions to understand the language. In essence, the Zohar is a medrash. It's a homily. It's a way of interpreting the Torah, particularly, but the entire Bible, since it was written in, or at least authored, the content was authored in the mostly in the 2nd century. So there wasn't any Talmud yet. So the Zohar also doesn't use a type of logical question and answer type of method. It's not trying to get down to the meaning of verses using the methods that we find in the Talmud. It's much earlier. You can sense that from the way that it's talking about things. It's describing rather than questioning. The Medrash is usually that way. The Medrash is usually describing things, going deeper and deeper into them, but not using the what we call shakla v'tarya, which is the Aramaic words for questioning and cross-questioning, or debating what the meaning of something might be. So the Zohar, to anyone who studies it seriously, can't really connect it to anything other than that time period, because that's how things were done back then. Once the Talmud hit the scene in the 5th century and 6th century, everything changed. The entire way of discussing things changed. We don't find that type of that back and forth in the earlier literature, and the Zohar is like that earlier literature. It's very close to all the other early literature from that period. But what it does is it looks at the Torah from a completely different point of view. And Rabbi Shimon was told in his connection with the soul of Moses that it is with this book that you will come out of exile with compassion. And this was definitely a statement that was talking to the method that Rabbi Akiva pursued, which was to come out of the exile through basically through using weapons, through trying to battle our way out of exile. And we, from that moment on, I think that the moment that the Zohar became available sometime in the 14th century, until then its teachings were passed down secretly or in some other way that's not so clear, until it became really possible to study it in the 13th, 14th centuries. It changed, once it became available, it changed the way of thinking about the exile and understanding that the exile is going to end when we understand the inner interpretation of the Torah. And that's what the Zohar does. It reinterprets the entire Torah in a way that is shocking. At first, it takes a long time to begin to understand how to work with it. It's not something that you can master so easily, but it's basically the basis for everything we speak about in these short classes, and everything that was taught in Kabbalah and in Chassidut. There are many parallels between the Zohar and other Midrashic and Mishnaic literature, many parallels. Too many to note. A lot of stuff is just repeated here and there in two different ways. But the Zohar's entire bent is explained in two very important pieces of sort of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai revealing his heart. The one was a little bit before he passed away. It's called the Idra Rabbah, the great gathering or the major gathering. And then on the day of his passing, apparently on Lag BaOmer, today, the 33rd day of the Omer, the 18th of Iyar, he taught the Idra Zuta, which means a small or minor gathering. And in these two sections, which amazingly were not interpreted, were very hard to understand, and were not interpreted until Rabbi Isaac Luria came along in the 16th century, in about 1530, 1532, 1533. That's when he interpreted them, and he gave a mind-blowing interpretation of what they mean. If you understand his Kabbalah, his teachings, and you go back to the Idrot, to these two gatherings, what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, you can almost hear how the words fit exactly the system that Rabbi Isaac Luria built. It's not normal to be able to understand this from the words. It was definitely what we call a revelation of Elijah, but we have it now, and the important thing is how to use it. And Hasidic teachings use it in a particular way, which is to see the godliness in the soul, to see the godliness in the psychology of a person. And that's really the basis of our teachings here. And we've been talking a lot about these things. Really today we're celebrating the opening up of the wellsprings of the inner Torah, and what it really means to be able to see godliness within nature, and godliness within man, and so on. And it comes full circle back to this idea that Rabbi Shimon had, that with these teachings you will come out of the exile with compassion, meaning that when these teachings spread around the world, they spread for Jews, for non-Jews, these teachings will change the way that humanity sees itself. It will begin to explain to us why we are really united at our core, and they pose a completely different hope for us. What we want to do today, we don't have more than a couple of minutes left, is to connect this to the first reading of this week's Parsha, Bechukotai. Lag BaOmer is always on the week of Parshat Bechukotai, the beginning or end of it, And this year it comes out perfectly because it's on the first day. Bechukotai is the 33rd parsha of the Torah. And today we're on the 33rd day of the Omer. So it's a beautiful connection. Another beautiful connection is that the first two words, im bechukotai, if you follow my commandments, and this is obviously the most important thing that the inner teachings of the Torah have to tell us, the importance of commandments, the importance of action, and not thinking that somehow these commandments are symbolic of something. They might be, but they still need to be followed. And by following them, by actually doing them, the doing process, a human being doing something, is the greatest novelty of the human being, which is much greater than an angel or any kind of other spiritual force, that we can actually manipulate and change physical reality and sanctify it with our actions. And this sanctification doesn't just mean that we come and we bless something and we say, oh, it's now very nice and blessed. What we really mean is that through our actions, we are preparing the world for the revelation of God in a way that He cannot be revealed right now, because we don't have the shielding, if you would like, to be able to handle that type of revelation. Meaning, a revelation on the scale of what Torah wants is something that the Torah says itself, Ki lo yirani adam v'chai, that man cannot tolerate and still be alive, because we're so used to living or seeing ourselves separate from reality. And only when you perform the commandments do you receive a shield, a purpose. We've talked about this in the past, that allows the revelation of the Mashiach, the revelation of the redemption, all these things to come, and for us to continue to live our lives and be able to function and not be completely blinded and incapable of functioning when this happens. So these words, v'im bechukotai, these first two words of the parsha, of our parsha, the first two words of our reading, they equal what we call the triangle of 33. Triangular numbers means that we do the sum from 1 to n. So in this case, it's 1 plus 2 plus 3, all the way up to 33. And the sum is 561. That's the value of im bechukotai, if you follow my commandments. So it's another way of seeing 33 in here, and that perfectly fits with the counting of the Omer, because when we count the Omer, we don't say today is the first day, today is the second day, the third day, the fourth day. We don't use that language. We actually say today is 1 day in the Omer, today is 2 days to the Omer, 3 days to the Omer, 4 days, and so we're actually doing exactly that function of adding the integers, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. So on the 33rd day, we've actually counted up to 561. We're on the 33rd day, but because we're accumulating these numbers, so it's like we have the triangle of 33. 33 is also the value of Rav Ginsburg's, the name that he chose for all his activity, which is Gal Einai. Gal is 33. It's the same word as lag. It's just reversed. Lag is the way you would say 33. It's not something that means anything. It's just 33. It's a way to designate it in Hebrew letters. But Gal is the first word of the verse that he chose from Psalms 119. Gal einai v'abita niflaot mitoratecha. Open my eyes, or unveil my eyes, so I can see the wonders of your Torah. And so that's a beautiful connection also to the work that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai brought into the world, that allows us to see the secret, the wonders. It's not so much a secret in the sense of something that's hidden, that's mysterious. It's more that it's concealed. You don't see it at first. And everything that we've been teaching, everything we teach in these classes, and everything that is around Rav Ginsburg is trying to show the wonderment of the deep study of Torah and the incredible implications it has for life, for the way that we see ourselves. But as we said, the most important implication in the end is always im bechukotai, if you follow my commandments. The action of performing God's commandments. And we've talked about this in the past. Let me just repeat this, because it's so important, that there can be no real bridge between the infinite, God's infinite nature, and our finite nature without the commandments. And the parable that's brought in Hasidic thought is that if there is someone who is infinitely wise and a simpleton, how can they connect? They can never have a conversation. But if the infinitely wise man says to the simpleton, could you please bring me a cup of tea? And he does that for him, they're immediately bonded together. And that, in that sense, is what the commandments do. That's why the Baal Shem Tov interpreted the commandments mean, they come from the word mitzvah, doesn't necessarily come, but the way you can see it is that it comes from the word tzavta. And tzavta means to be together. It connects us to God in a way that nothing else can. Not even the study of Torah can bring us to that level of connection, because again, in the study of Torah, we can only reach and understand as much as we are capable of, and our minds are finite. So as much as we reveal the wonders of the Torah, it's still not the same thing as performing a commandment. Performing commandment is connecting to God's infinite nature, and therefore it is of a higher stature, a higher meaning, and that is the real preparation to understand the wonders of the Torah in order to come to an understanding that this is the way of life to follow. And when this all comes together, then we will come out of the exile with compassion, the way that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was told by Moses' soul. And with that, let's end today. Hope to see you tomorrow. And as they say now, happy Lag BaOmer, Lag Sameach, a happy 33rd.